Hello and warm greetings. Welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram And Ravi, where we would try to comprehensively analyze 9 articles in 2 different sections. In the analysis part, we'll first have a discussion with respect to the importance, issues, and the way forward with respect to India's manufacturing sector. In the second article, we'll have a discussion with respect to the elderly population in India and how to reap the silver dividend. Then, in the simplified section, we'll have a discussion with respect to 7 different articles along with the value addition. So stay tuned. So coming to the very first article, it is about India's manufacturing sector. So recently, the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation has released the report, Annual Survey of Industries. And this report is for the financial year 2022-23. And this report says that the gross value added, it grew by 7.3% in the current prices in 2022-23 over 21-22. Citing this report, the CEO of the Niti Aayog, Mr. BVR Subramaniam, has said that India's industrial sector is growing at a fast pace. Now, this gives us the opportunity to discuss the manufacturing sector in detail. What are the issues plaguing the manufacturing sector and what can be the way forward? Now, this is with respect to GS3, Indian economy and manufacturing. Now, let's first have a good understanding of the manufacturing sector. See, manufacturing sector is the one which is very important if we consider its output in the form of providing employment opportunities, providing entrepreneurship avenues, and promoting balanced regional development, right? Now, if you go into the data says that the manufacturing sector, it contributed to 16.3% to India's GDP in the financial year 2021-22, right? And the national policy on manufacturing aims to increase this level to 25% by the financial year 2025-26, right? Now, if you go into the numbers of the people employed, you will see that almost 5 crore people are actually employed directly in the manufacturing sector. And almost 9 crore people, that is 90 million people, they are indirectly employed. Next, if you go into the data with respect to the index of industrial production, it witnessed a growth of almost 12% in the financial year 21-22 compared to the previous year. The manufacturing sector is projected to grow at a compound annual growth rate of 12% during the years from 21 till 26, right? Now, see, again, if you look at the gross value added, right, at current prices in $1 billion, you will see that in the first quarter of financial year 24, it was $770.1 billion, right? And see, it was the same number was 713. So it has primarily increased. The gross value added has increased. Now, if you look at the capacity utilization in the manufacturing sector was almost 74.7% in the third quarter of the financial year 24, right? Again, if you look at the index of industrial production in various sectors, you'll see in mining, manufacturing, electricity, you are witnessing a good growth, right? Next is that if you analyze the total FDI inflow in different sectors and different subsectors in the manufacturing, you will see that the services account for almost 16.1%. Then you have got computer software and hardware at 15.2% at the second level. Then you have got the telecommunications at 5.8%. Then you have got trading at 6.4%, right? So these are the subsectors, right? Again, what we are trying to say is that the manufacturing sector is a diversified sector. It has many subsectors in it, right? Now, the major sectors which are included in the manufacturing sector are automobiles, textiles, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, electronics, machinery, and steel. Now, you would be surprised to know that the automobile sector alone contributes to almost 7.1% to the country's GDP and is a significant exporter. It is one of the sectors which provides a lot of forex sources to India. Now, coming to the government schemes and initiatives which have been there for promoting the manufacturing sector. The first and foremost is the Make in India initiative. Now, this was launched in the year 2014, and that is why we are actually also celebrating the 10 years of Make in India program. Now, this was for both domestic as well as foreign companies who are trying to manufacture in India, right? Now, this was across different sectors, textiles, computers, hardwares, different sectors, and it aimed to increase the manufacturing sector's GDP share to 25% by the financial year 2025, right? So that is what you need to know about this. Next is the production linked incentive scheme. Now this scheme was launched in the financial year 2020. Now this provides the financial incentives to manufacturers for incremental production. So as they would increase their production, they would get the financial incentives from the government. Now it is for various sectors, from textiles to medical supplies to other sectors as well, right? So this actually, it incorporates the financial incentives to the tune of $26 billion. That is almost around 2 lakh crores, right? For various PLI schemes. Next is the Atmanirbhar Bharat, right? So this was launched in the financial year 2020. Now this was primarily after we had the COVID-19 pandemic, right? So it was basically to spur the demand in the economy, right? So financial incentives were provided by the government. So it was primarily to boost the domestic manufacturing and reduce reliance on imports, right? Especially in critical sectors. Now what were the critical sectors? For example, we have got the defense. For example, we have got the medical supplies, right? For example, we have got the electronics, right? So primarily to make sure that these sectors develop and these sectors have indigenous production, we had this Atmanirbhar Bharat. Now, the package included almost $265 billion. Now, this amounts to almost 20 lakh crores in Indian rupees, right? Next is we had the national policy on electronics. Now, see, government in the last decade, it has been focusing on enhancing the electronics production in the country. So recently, you must have heard about, we recently inaugurated the semiconductor fabrication facility in Gujarat, right? So again, the government is trying to focus upon this sector so that we can be self-sufficient in this aspect, right? Slowly, as we are witnessing Industrial Revolution 4.0, we actually need more of these electronics, right? And we cannot be dependent on the other countries for that. So therefore, the government is stressing upon the boost on the manufacturing of these things in India itself, right? Now, we have this national policy on electronics. Now, to make India as a global hub for electronics manufacturing, now the target set by the government is to achieve $400 billion by the year 2025-26. Next is the Skill India and Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana. Now, please understand, we have got the industries. Now, these industries demand a specific skill set, right? In order to make provisions for those skills, what the government has been doing is it has been promoting various initiatives. It has been promoting various institutions. For example, we have got the National Skill Development Corporation, right? Through that, so that we can have people at large, the workforce can be skilled, right? And once you have got a skilled workforce, that would obviously enhance the productivity of the overall manufacturing sector, right? So to enhance the skills of the workforce to meet the demands of the manufacturing sector. Next, we have got some of the schemes related to the micro, small and medium enterprises, right? For example, we had the Emergency Credit Link Guarantee Scheme. Now, this was basically launched after the COVID-19 pandemic, and incentives to the tune of $40 billion. Now, this is around 3 lakh crores were provided during the pandemic. Now, MSME as a sector is very important when we consider the manufacturing scenario, right? So for the MSMEs, government has taken a lot of initiatives. For example, if I can cite, first is Udyam Portal, right? So government has made a portal where different MSMEs can register, and then once they register, they can claim the benefits of different schemes which the government is providing. Next, we have got the credit linked capital subsidy scheme, right? So primarily the aim of the credit linked capital subsidy scheme is to increase the technology in these MSMEs. See, again, most of these MSMEs don't have the adequate sources. So to enhance the technology so that they can be more efficient, we have got this credit linked capital subsidy scheme. Then we have got other schemes. For example, we have got the PM Mudra, which aims to provide collateral free loans to the tune of 10 lakh, right? So these are the schemes for different sectors. Now, coming to the issues and challenges with respect to the manufacturing sector in the country. The first is the infrastructure deficiencies. See, please understand that still, see, over the last few years, over the last decades, we have definitely invested a lot of money in the infrastructure creation, definitely. But still, there are a lot of lacunae, there are loopholes, right? So what we see is that the logistics cost in India is very much. It is around 13 to 14% of the GDP, right? And when we compare this with the developed countries, it is almost, in the developed countries, it is almost 8 to 9%. Right? So once you have got the high logistics costs, that obviously increases the final price of the product, and that has to be borne by the end consumer, right? Again, what we are seeing is that there are other issues with respect to infrastructure also. For example, there is capital crunch. See, please understand that these infrastructure projects, they are highly capital intensive. Government doesn't have the enough resources on its own. So it has to depend on the other sources, for example, the private sector or the international funds, right? Then there are issues with respect to the project delays. See, it is primarily because of the lack of management principles or lack of managerial expertise in these projects, and that leads to project delays. Also, there are issues of corruption involved. Then let's talk about the labor laws and skill gaps. See, India as of now, again, we have tried to improve the regulatory structure, but still there are rigid labor laws, and this serves as a disincentive to formalize. Again, what we are seeing is that once you have got a sort of a very rigid framework of laws, that is not something which is good for the small MSMEs in particular, right? Because they have got a resource crunch. And if you are making them to follow a rigid, complex structure, obviously it's an added burden on them, right? Again, there's the issue of skill mismatch. What do we mean by that? See, there is a specific skill set which is demanded by the industry. But what we are seeing is that the supply of skill set is not in sync with the demand of the industry. So there is a skill mismatch. What we see that only 2% of the workforce have formal skills. Now, if you compare this number with developed countries, for example, Japan, almost 68% of the workforce in Japan has a sort of formal training, and this number is only 2% in India. Next is low technological adoption. See, again, as I said, that this is the time that we are witnessing the Industrial Revolution 4.0, where we have got new disruptive technologies, starting from the machine learning to cloud computing, to quantum computing, to artificial intelligence. But these technologies are not being utilized effectively. What we are seeing is that because of the lack of resources, these technologies are not integrated into the various manufacturing domains, right? So there is limited adoption of advanced technologies, and this obviously hampers the productivity and the efficiency of the manufacturing sector. Next, the India ranked 51st in the Global Innovation Index. Now, this highlights, definitely the position has improved over the years, but this highlights to the fact that there is a great scope of improvement when we talk in the context of the technological development. Next is the complex land and regulatory issues. See, there are issues with respect to land acquisition, and this is primarily in the domain of the state governments, right? So sometimes you have got the farmers protesting, and their causes are sometimes obviously genuine, right? So, but what we are seeing is that there are issues with respect to the acquisition of land for building a particular industry, right? And that is basically a very big concern. Then there are numerous regulatory requirements. Now, this obviously has an effect on the project, and it leads to the delay in the project. And obviously, it leads to the inefficiency in the project. Next is less focus on the core business activity. Now, please understand, if you have a very complex structure, if you have a very complex regulatory procedure, obviously it would have an effect on the end manufacturer. Why? Because the manufacturer would have to invest a lot of time and money in making sure that he follows those regulatory structure, right? And that would obviously make him to focus less on his core business activity. Next is the issue of high cost of capital. Please understand that for MSMEs, now this is primarily in the context of the MSMEs find it very difficult to secure affordable credit, right? And according to the Reserve Bank of India, only 16% of MSMEs are able to secure timely and affordable credit from traditional sources, right? What it means is that most of the MSMEs, they have to depend upon the informal sources for the credit. Then we have got dependence on the informal sources, and this affects the adoption of technology. Now, this is but obvious. If you have a resource crunch in the terms of money, obviously you would not be able to spend on making sure that you integrate technology into the manufacturing process, right? So obviously it acts as a disincentive. Next is global supply chain disruptions. See, now this was especially after the COVID-19 pandemic, that we witnessed that there was a significant disruption to the global supply chain. And the world, is primarily dependent on China, be it the raw materials, be it the finished products. And that at that point, we witnessed that how vulnerable were different countries. So you must be aware that we also launched a particular initiative that is Supply Chain Resilience Initiative. Now you need to tell me the countries who participated in this initiative. Do write in the comment section, right? So we had this particular initiative, that is Supply Chain Resilience Initiative. Again, what I'm trying to say is that Once you have got different countries who are integrated with respect to the global supply chain of the transfer of raw materials and the finished products, obviously it has effect. If there is a particular issue, it has effect on the other countries as well, right? So these disruptions obviously affect the domestic economy of different countries also. Now this impacts the availability of raw materials and exports. Next issue is with respect to the environmental and sustainability challenges. Again, what I'm trying to focus is that because of the usage of the obsolete technology, what we are witnessing is that these industries are contributing a lot to the overall pollution, right? Again, if you have got green technologies in place, that would lower down the pollution levels, right? These industries also face pressure to adopt sustainable practices. Now, again, when they don't have the adequate money, obviously they won't be able to invest in technology and also in green technologies, making sure that they have got sustainable mechanisms in place. So that is what they face the pressure of actually making sure that they adopt these sustainable practices. So these are some of the issues which are faced by the manufacturing sector. Now, what should be the way forward? The first and foremost is infrastructure development. Very important. See, there has to be continued investment in transport, power, digital infrastructure, so as to make sure that the overall logistic cost is less and overall logistics is very efficient, right? Because once you'll have a very efficient logistics supply chain, that would obviously have an effect on the final price of the good. It would lower down the final price of the good, and that would be better for the end consumer, right? Then we have got the projects like the National Infrastructure Pipeline. So the government aims to mobilize almost 1 lakh crore, right? Sorry, 100 lakh crores. So we have got the share of the center to almost 39%. Then we have got this share of the state to 39%. And then we have got the private sector. Again, what you need to focus upon is that it is not a single stakeholder approach. That is, it's not just the center government who is actually contributing. It's a mixed approach, mixed stakeholder, where you have got the center government, we have got the state government and the private sector who are contributing, right? So this particular initiative is trying to mobilize the capital sources and making sure that we have got adequate investment in different sectors. For example, it is energy sector, then we have got the road sector, then we've got the irrigation, rural agriculture, then we've got the mobility, railways, digital infrastructure, ports and airports. Next is labor and skill development reforms. So there has to be reforms in the labor laws so as to make sure that these labor laws are not rigid. These labor laws should be conducive in nature so that these MSMEs and the manufacturing units find it easy to basically follow them, right? And focus has to be on technical and vocational education to address the skill gap. Very important. See, also according to the World Bank, what the World Bank says is that at present, the kind of education and vocational system we have in India, it would only be able to cater to almost 25% of the future jobs. That is, we need to change the education and the vocational training aspect, the whole scenario, so that we are better prepared for the future jobs, right? Again, the industry has a demand of a particular skill set. That skill set need to be provided. And again, the approach has to be on a demand side, right? It should not be based on a supply side, rather on the demand side. That is on the basis of the needs of the industries. Next is technological upgradation. Very important. To encourage the adoption of the Industrial Revolution 4.0 technologies and invest in the research and development. Very important. See, if you invest in technologies, be it cloud computing, be in blockchain technologies, right? So just imagine that if you have got blockchain technologies in the whole supply chain of the manufacturing, how efficient it would make the whole supply chain, right? And obviously it would lower down the prices also. Then you've got the cloud computing, then you've got the artificial intelligence. So these technologies, then you have got the 3D computing, right? 3D printing, sorry, right? So these technologies need to be integrated so as to make sure that the whole supply chain is very efficient and the end price of the product, it reduces and it brings overall efficiency in the whole supply chain. Next is strengthening the MSMEs. Very important. So we need to actually focus upon the continued access to affordable credit and support. See, what we are trying to say is that there has to be proper channels so that adequate credit can be provided to even the last of the MSMEs, right? To the smallest of the MSMEs, and make sure that they are not dependent on the informal sources. Make sure that once they have got idea in place, once they have got the will to manufacturer to basically execute an idea, they have got adequate credit with them, right? And affordable credit. Then the incentives should be provided so as to make sure that they can formalize, right? Not by the rigid labor laws, but by conducive labor laws. Next is streamlining the regulatory process. Now, this is very important. Simplifying the regulations and enhancing land acquisition processes. The regulatory process has to be simplified so as to make sure that the businesses, the manufacturing units can focus more upon their core business activity. Again, as far as the land acquisition aspect is concerned, the onus primarily lies on the state governments, and the state governments need to make sure that once you have got a proper land acquisition which takes place, different stakeholders, the needs of the different stakeholders are kept in mind, and adequate impetus should be given so as to promote, so as to make sure that you have got fast clearances with respect to these land acquisition processes. Then we have got the focus on the exports, very important. So developing export hubs and negotiating free trade agreements with key markets. Again, we have got the economies in the Europe or the Western part, right? So what we see is that these economies, these countries, they are actually demanding Indian products now, right? Previously, there were concerns with respect to the quality, but now Indian products are actually matching the international standards. So again, what I'm trying to say is that there has to be adequate impetus on manufacturing so that India can again become an export hub. Next is sustainable manufacturing, very important. So there has to be adequate emphasis on promoting green technologies. Let's take the case of solar rooftops, or let's take the case of hydrogen fuel cell technology or battery storage technology. So these technologies need to be integrated, right? Then sustainable practices, incentives for energy efficient production. See, you must be knowing that we have got Perform, Achieve, Trade, PAT scheme. Now this is by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. Now you need to tell me under which ministry it comes, right? So we have got the Perform, Achieve, Trade by the Indian government. Now this particular scheme tries to reduce the energy consumption in some of the energy intensive industries, right? So as to make sure that they adopt green technologies. Now, energy efficient technology should be there. For example, there can be incentives in the form of carbon credits, right? So these things should be in place. Now again, what we are trying to say is that definitely India has witnessed growth rate in the manufacturing sector, right? It has provided a lot of employment opportunities, but still there are issues with respect to the manufacturing sector. And these steps must be kept in mind so that we can have a very blooming manufacturing sector, and its share can be actually increased to 25% by the financial year 2025. That is what the aim of the government is also, right? So these things are with respect to this particular topic. These are things which you need to remember, right? Before we go to the next topic, we have a mains question. So we have a question of 2017, right? The question says, account for the failure of the manufacturing sector in achieving the goal of labor-intensive exports. Suggest measure for more labor-intensive, rather capital-intensive exports. Now we have a mains practice question. So the question says, though India is witnessing continuous growth in the manufacturing sector, some issues still retard the realization of its true potential. Elaborate. Do write a particular question answer on this questions. Now, before we go to the next topic, I have got two quick questions for you to assess your UPSC preparation. The first question is, now this is with respect to polity. Listen carefully. To whom does the speaker submits his resignation? Right? If he wants to resign, to whom does the Speaker of the Lok Sabha submits his resignation? The second question is that we have got two water bodies. One is the Sea of Azov and the other is the Black Sea. Again, I'm repeating, we have got the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea. Which is the strait which separates the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea? Do write in the comment section. So I'm waiting for your answers. So coming to the second article, it is with respect to the India's elderly population and how to reap this silver dividend. So what we are witnessing is that with the rise in the quantum and share of the elderly population, there's a need for tailored reforms to cater to the evolving needs of the country's senior citizens. Now, this is a part of GS2, social sector and vulnerable sections. Now, see, India, as the other countries are, we are actually witnessing the exponential growth in the number and proportion of the elderly people. Now, why this is so? This is primarily because of two reasons. First is that there has been a reduction in the total fertility rate across states in India, right? Second is that there is the enhanced longevity. That is, there has been increased life expectancy, and that basically, these two factors are responsible in making sure that you have got the increase in the number and proportion of the elderly population. So according to the United Nations Population Fund Agency, as of now, the share of the elderly population in the country's overall population, it stands to be around 10%, but it is slated to go to almost 19.5% by the year 2050. Right. Now, if you just see at this infographic, you will see that as of now, according to the census, it was 104 million in 2011. It is projected to go to 300 million in 2050. Again, the elderly population in India, 134 million in 2020, is fast reaching the current size of the population of the Mexico or Russia. Next is the 2050 population of the elderly will be close to the population of the US, that is 326 million in 2018, right? Next, India's 12 million population of 80 plus is equal to that of the total population of countries such as Belgium, Greece or Cuba. Now, if you just look at this particular chart, you will see the growth rate. You will see that the decadal growth rate in the elderly population is quite large, right? See, it was from the period 2011-21, it was 35.8%, and the projected is from 2021 till 2031, it is 40.5, right? Now, if you just see the same for the overall population, you will see it was 12.1%, 12.4% and 8.4%. So there is a significant gap. The gap is increasing. This signifies that the share of the elderly population, the proportion, is constantly increasing in the overall population. Now, this issue was used to be with the developed countries, right? But now what we are witnessing is that this issue is also with respect to the two most populous countries in the world, that is India and China. Now, the reason primarily is that we have got a huge share of population. The total fertility rates are declining. So therefore, in the years to come, we'll have a large share of the elderly population. This demands that adequate attention is being paid to this particular sector, right? Now, if we just compare the healthcare consumption, what we see is the current expenditure, the current statistics stand at almost $7 billion with respect to the expenditure on the healthcare services for the elderly section. Next, what we see is, we have got a particular survey, that is longitudinal aging survey of India, LASI of 2021. Now, this survey says that almost 75% of the elderly, they suffer from a chronic ailment, right? This survey also says that almost 1/3, 33% of these elderly, they suffer from depressive symptoms, and they have got low life satisfaction, right? Then there are issues with respect to the economic insecurity. That is, the healthcare costs, the financial burden on the elderly are too much, and they are not in the condition to bear these financial burden. Now, this leads us to talk about a new concept, and that is the silver economy. Now, what is silver economy? Now, if we define it, it refers to the economic activity and the market opportunities generated by the aging populations. It encompasses the goods and the services that are specifically designed to meet the needs and preferences of older consumers, as well as those that are used by older people but can also be consumed by the people of all ages. So primarily, the goods and the services which are used by this section of the population, right? Once you have got different industries producing these goods and services, that constitutes the silver economy. Now, the silver economy, once you've got the elderly population, the share is increasing. Obviously, the silver economy proportion would also increase, right? So therefore, adequate attention has to be paid on this silver economy. Now, the market value of this silver economy in India as of now stands to be around 73,000 crores, right? Now, as I said, the demographic trends, what they show is that the elderly population is projected to constitute almost 13.2% in the year 2031. And it would be almost 19%, say 20% by the year 2050, right? Becoming a major consumer segment, right? Next, the healthcare consumption, what we are seeing is that the major portion of the expenditure is on the healthcare. That is, 1/3 of their spending is on the healthcare for these elderly people. Now, if you just look at this infographic, you can get a lot of details here. It says that the market is estimated to be almost $42.2 billion projected value of the silver economy by the year 2028. $25.7 billion worth of silver economy in 2021. 20% of the total population comprised of senior citizens by the year 2050. 10% senior citizens share in the total population in 2022. So just see, from 2022 till 2050, from 10% till 20% of the total population. Now, the required talent is physiotherapists, nurses, caretakers, counselors. What are the job opportunities? Companions for the elderly, research and development and manufacturing roles. What are the segments? We have got geriatric wearables, health monitoring devices, super specializations in medicine and care, legal and financial products. So these are some of the areas in which the silver economy would run. Now, what should be the approach to make sure that we properly utilize the silver economy, right? And make sure that the elderly population is given proper care and attention. Now, the first is that there needs to be a multi-sectoral reform. That is, the reform has to be comprehensive in nature. It should include various aspects, that is health, the social aspect, the economic aspect, the digital sectors, and the policies should be formed in such a way that we have got the inputs from all these sectors. Next is that there has to be focus on the health empowerment of these elderly sections. What needs to be done is to focus upon the health literacy of the elderly population and obviously the caregivers also, right? So the health literacy aspect is very important. Next is Ayushman Arogya Mandir. So this is a proposed initiative now which focuses upon both the preventive and rehabilitative services through the Ayush, that is Ayurveda, Unani, Siddha and homeopathy. Next is strengthening the healthcare infrastructure. Now this becomes very important. See, what we need to focus upon is the teleconsultation model. For example, we have got e-Sanjeevani, right? So this, what it does is that it enhances the accessibility of the care for these sections. Let's say if you have got a particular elderly person or a section of the elderly persons who is in Northeast. So you can have proper teleconsultations mechanisms and you can provide the health services. Next is skilled workforce development. Again, adequate provisions need to be made so as to make sure that the caregiver economy, right, is properly skilled to give the desired services. Also, according to the Niti Aayog, what the Niti Aayog says is that if you have got the home-based care, if the hospital-based care is actually, it's replaced by the home-based care, you can have 65% reduction in the hospital visits and almost 20% reduction in the overall cost, overall expenditure on the health, right? So adequate emphasis has to be given on home-based care. Next is that holistic services should be included. That also the mental health, the nutritional services. See, it's not just restricted to the medicine aspect. It's not just restrictive to the aspect of catering to the health. It's the overall health. That is, it includes the mental health also and the nutrition services. Next is addressing the financial insecurities. Very important. See, the concern is that as people age, their financial backup reduces, right? So as to make sure they have got adequate finances with them, we have to focus upon the making sure that we have got adequate emphasis on the financial inclusion aspect, right? So community sensitization must be there. So there has to be awareness among the community, and we have to make sure that there are peer support groups so that these elderly population can depend upon these peer groups. Next, we have to provide financial protection in the form of, for example, let's say the case that we can have a insurance coverage of almost 5 lakh rupees for the individuals over 70, right? Then we have to reskill the younger population. See, as of now, what we are seeing is that there is huge unemployment. We need to make sure that we have got proper skilled youth in place so that they can have adequate employment opportunities, they can have their own savings, and once they age, they have got enough financial backup for themselves, right? Next is digital inclusion for the elderly. There is a need for digital adoption. Digital skills need to be given to these elderly, right? So as to increase the accessibility of these health services or other services. Then we have to target the current and the future elderly. And we have to do by enhancing the digital literacy, growing digital economy, right? So we have to focus upon making sure that different digital skills, or let's say digital literacy programs, they are taken to these elderly sections also and not just restricted to the youth. Now, what have been the government initiatives? See, we have got a sacred portal. Now this aims to connect the senior citizens with job providers in the private sector. Then we have got the SAGE initiatives. Now the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, this is basically promoting those startups who are actually producing goods and services for the elderly, right? So that is the SAGE initiative. Then we have got other schemes also. For example, we have got the Rashtriya Vayoshree Yojana, or for instance, we have got the Indira Gandhi National Old Age Pension Scheme, right? Again, there are different schemes in place. So what we are trying to say is that there is the increase. This segment of the population is going to increase further, and we should not treat the elderly population as something as that of a liability. They are an assets because they have got a huge knowledge and experience with them. So we have to utilize their knowledge and experience. We have to make sure that they are actually given proper health. They are given proper health care, and that can be done once we have got proper system in place. So these are the steps which are needed in order to make sure that we can properly use this particular silver economy, and we can reap the dividend of this particular silver economy. That is what you need to know with respect to this particular article. So before we go to the next topic, we have a question. So the question, now this year we had a particular question in 2024 itself. The question says, what is the concept of demographic winter? Is the world moving towards such a situation? Elaborate. Now this is, you have to answer in 150 words. Then you have got a practice question. The question says, with the rise of the elderly population, the prospects of silver economy look bright. Discuss. 15 marks, 250 words. Do write a particular answer on this question. Now coming to the simplified section, we have got the first article which says that the Prime Minister Modi is set to launch the sanitation projects worth more than 9,600 crores on October 2nd. Now, this is with respect to GS2, social sector and education. Now, see, what this particular article says that the Prime Minister would mark the 10 years of the Swachh Bharat mission on October 2nd, that is Swachh Bharat Divas. Now, before we go further, let's first talk about Swachh Bharat mission. So, the Swachh Bharat mission was launched on October 2nd, 2014 by the Government of India to accelerate the efforts to achieve universal sanitation coverage and improve the cleanliness. Now, see, primarily it has got two components. One is the rural component, the other is the urban. The rural component, or what we call as the Grameen component, says that the objective was to make the rural areas open defecation free, right, by constructing toilets and promoting hygiene practices. The urban part says it was basically focused upon targeting the solid waste management, sanitation infrastructure development, and eliminating the open defecation in cities and towns. The mission also focuses upon the behavior change, making sure that people use the toilets, right, and do not defecate in the open, then also enhancing the public participation and on promoting the sustainable sanitation practices, right. Now, the overall amount which these schemes would accrue would be around 9,600 crores over and above that. Now, this would basically showcase, the Swachh Bharat Divas would showcase India's decade-long sanitation achievements, and it would also mark the 10 years of the Swachh Bharat mission. Now, this is one of the most biggest mass movements with respect to the cleanliness, right? It would also be the 155th birth anniversary of Gandhiji, right? And more than 6,800 crores have been actually allotted for the Amrit and Amrit 2.0. Now, the Amrit scheme, Atal Mission for Rejuvenation and Urban Transformation, this was launched in June 2015, and the aim was to transform the urban infrastructure, particularly focusing upon the water supply, sewerage, urban transport, and creating green spaces. Now, the objective is to ensure that every household in the targeted cities has access to basic services like water supply and sewerage. Now, this was basically given a new modification, a new avatar, right? And that was in the form of Amrit 2.0. Now, this was launched in October 21, and the focus is to basically make sure that there is universal coverage of water supply across all urban areas, then reducing the water losses through the leaks, promoting water conservation, reuse, and integrated wastewater treatment, right? This is what you need to know with respect to Amrit and Amrit 2.0. Again, then the next aspect of this particular article is the National Mission for Clean Ganga. So you have got a particular amount of 1,550 crores, which has been allotted for this particular scheme. Now, the National Mission for Clean Ganga, it was launched as a part of Namami Gange program in the year 2014. It's a flagship program of the Government of India aimed at cleaning and rejuvenating the Ganga River, right? Now, this focuses upon some of the major aspects. There are pillars of this particular mission. The first is sewage treatment and infrastructure development. The second is river surface cleaning. Third is afforestation and biodiversity conservation. Fourth is public awareness and participation. The program aims to make Ganga River and its tributaries pollution-free, ensuring sustainable development in the Ganga River basin, right? This is the aspect. Now, the Swachh Bharat Divas program would set the stage for the next phase of this national endeavor. Nationwide participation from local government bodies, women groups, organizations, and community leaders. This also focuses upon the other aspect, and that is the Govardhan, right? So we have got this particular mission, which is also focusing upon the Govardhan scheme. So we have got almost 1,332 crore rupees, which are being actually planned for the Govardhan. Now, the Galvanizing Organic Bioagro Resource Dhan. The scheme was launched under the Swachh Bharat Mission Grameen in 2018. The scheme aims to promote the effective management of the cattle dung and organic waste. Now, how it tries to do so? By encouraging the conversion of bio-waste to bioenergy, right? We say it biogas and biofertilizers. Supporting the creation of infrastructure for the collection, treatment, and processing of waste, thus promoting a circular economy. So do remember these keywords. Providing rural households with alternate sources income through waste to wealth initiatives, right? So these are the 4 important areas which this particular article talks about. We also have the Swachhata Hi Seva, right? A national campaign, we'll talk about it. So primarily you need to focus upon the 4 aspects. The first is Swachh Bharat Mission. The second is Amrit and Amrit 2.2. The third is the National Mission for Clean Ganga. And the fourth is the Govardhan Scheme. Again, this is focusing upon Swachhata Hi Seva campaign 2024. Now this particular campaign, it's a national campaign under the Swachh Bharat Mission. Now this focuses upon engaging citizens and encouraging mass participation in activities, so as to make it a mass movement, right? So as to make sure that it's not restricted to a particular segment, rather all sections of the society are participating, right? It is related to the cleanliness and sanitation across India. The campaign typically takes place ahead of the Gandhi Jayanti on October 2, right? Now the objective is to reinforce the importance of cleanliness in public spaces, villages, cities, and neighborhoods by mobilizing people. Now the campaign encourages, first is mass cleanliness drives. People participate in cleaning public places, parks, road, etc. Then you've got waste management and plastic elimination. So the emphasis is placed on eliminating the single-use plastics and promoting proper waste segregation. Then it also focuses upon the behavioral change aspect. See, this is something which is the most important aspect, because until unless you have got people who are actually not changing the behavior, then all these things are futile. So there is adequate focus upon the behavior change. Public awareness programs are conducted to promote hygiene, discourage open defecation, and encourage responsible waste management practices. Then there is also the focus upon the community involvement. So schools, colleges, community organizations, government bodies, businesses are engaged to work together to make the campaign a success. So this is what you need to know. These things, these missions can be important for the prelims. So we have got in all 5 things we have studied. The first is Swachh Bharat Mission. Second is the Amrit 2.2. Third is the National Mission for Clean Ganga. Then you have got the Govardhan Scheme. And then we have got the Swachhata Hi Seva campaign. So do remember this. Now coming to the next article, it is with respect to the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India. Now this is stressing upon the importance of digital radio broadcasting, right? So see, first let's talk about the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India. So TRAI is a statutory body, right? That is, its constitution is based upon our statutory law, right? And the law was the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India Act of 1997. Now this primarily the objective, the mandate of this body is to regulate the telecommunications sector in the country. Now, the objective of TRAI is to ensure the orderly growth of the telecom industry, protecting the interests of the consumers and promoting fair competition among the different service providers. Now, what are the key functions and responsibilities of TRAI? The first is regulation of telecom services. See, it basically formulates the regulations and gives recommendations on issues such as what should be the telecom tariffs, what should be the standards with respect to the quality of service, how the licenses should be given with respect to the service providers. It also ensures that the telecom operators comply with the standards of service, including the quality and the cost of services provided to the customers. Next is that it also focuses upon the consumer protection by making sure that we have got the consumer complaints which are properly registered with the TRAI on issues like billing, service quality, and transparency. It also regularly updates the guidelines on matters such as mobile number portability, do not disturb services to block the unwanted calls, and transparency in the tariff plans. Next, it also focuses upon making sure that there is a purely competitive market, right? So TRAI works to ensure a competitive environment in the telecom industry by making sure that there are no monopolistic practices in place, right? By encouraging fair practices among the telecom service providers and preventing monopolistic behavior. It also facilitates the entry of new players in the market while maintaining a level playing field. Next is spectrum management, right? So we have got the frequency, telecom frequency. That is known as the spectrum. So the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India makes recommendations regarding the allocation, pricing, and management of radio frequency, which are otherwise commonly known as the spectrum. So do remember, the spectrum is nothing but the radio frequencies used by the telecom operators for providing services like mobile communication and broadcasting. Again, TRAI is also responsible for the regulation of broadcasting and cable services. So TRAI's mandate was extended in the year 2024 to include broadcasting and cable services. It regulates the television and cable networks, including the pricing, content delivery, which ensures a fair distribution of channels and affordable pricing for the end consumers. Next is that it also gives recommendation to the government. So it provides recommendations to the government with respect to the different policy matters. For example, we have got the spectrum auctions or mergers and acquisitions of telecom companies and internet services. Next is it also deliberates and gives a recommendation with respect to the telecom and broadcasting tariffs. So TRAI regulates the tariff for the telecom services, ensuring the prices are fair for the consumers while being sustainable for the operators. So it's not just that it only takes into consideration the interests of the consumer. It also makes sure that the prices are set in such a manner that it is good. It's a win-win situation for both the service providers as well as the end consumers. It also issues guidelines on broadcasting tariffs, particularly to make television channel packages more affordable and transparent. Recent initiatives, if you talk about the TRAI, first is the 5G rollout. So TRAI has played a very important role with respect to facilitating the introduction of 5G technology in India by managing the spectrum auctions and setting the standards of the service quality. Next, it has also played a very important role with respect to the OTT, over-the-top regulations, services. So we have got the over-the-top services. For example, we have the WhatsApp or the Netflix, right? So TRAI is also regulating them. TRAI has been exploring the regulation of OTT services to ensure that they adhere to certain standards without stifling the competition. Next, it also focuses upon the digital infrastructure, making sure that you have got adequate digital infrastructure in place. TRAI promotes digital infrastructure development by encouraging investment in fiber optic networks, improving broadband access in both the rural and the urban areas. Now, this article talks about digital radio broadcasting. See, again, if you go into the definition, what it says is that it basically refers to the transmission of the radio signals using digital technology instead of traditional analog methods. So we have got traditional analog method, for example, the amplitude modulation or frequency modulation. So what we are doing is that we are using digital technology to transmit the radio signals, and that is what we call as the digital radio broadcasting. Now this has several advantages over the conventional mode, that is over the analog mode. What are the advantages? First is improved audio quality. See, digital radio, it basically offers clearer sound quality, which is free from static noise interference, right? That often affect the analog radio transmissions. Now we have got interferences in the analog transmissions that affects the quality of the audio, but once we are using the digital mode, it doesn't happen, right? And we have got proper quality audio with us. So in different formats, for example, we have got the digital audio broadcasting or the high definition radio providing high quality sounds. Then it also makes sure that there is efficient usage of the spectrum of the radio frequencies. Digital radio allows multiple channels to be transmitted over the same frequency. Please understand, over the same frequency, you can have multiple channels. So obviously it would enhance the spectrum usage, right? Enabling more stations in a given bandwidth compared to the analog radio. On an analog radio, what happens is on a particular frequency, you can only have a particular channel. But in digital mode, what you can have is on a particular frequency, you can have multiple channels, and that would enhance the usage. This results in greater variety of programming and more efficient use of the radio spectrum. Next is enhanced features. What are the enhanced features? Digital radios can display additional data, right? What additional data? In the form of song titles, artist information, traffic updates, weather alerts, station names. So just understand that if you have got digital radio, how beneficial it can be in terms of providing the weather data, right? Or other data with respect to the incoming natural calamities, or maybe in terms of the other aspects also, right? It supports interactive services enabling listeners to access on-demand content, pause the live broadcast, or rewind the radio programs. Then it has multicast capabilities. In digital radio, broadcasters can transmit several different programs on a single frequency. As I just said, that on a single frequency, you can have multiple channels. This allows a single station to offer multiple channels such as news, music, sports on the same particular frequency. Then it is also energy efficient. Digital transmitters are generally more energy efficient than analog transmitters, reducing the operational cost for the broadcasters. So once you have got the digital mode, obviously it would reduce the overall operational cost for the broadcasters. Then it also is better once we talk about the reception and coverage. So digital signals have more robust reception, ensuring consistent quality even in areas where analog signals may face difficulties, for example, urban regions with high interferences. So you have got high interferences with respect to the analog transmission, the signal transmission in the analog mode. But in the digital mode, that issue is not there. Now, if you go into this particular article, what the TRAI, that is Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, is saying is that it is actually focusing, it is stressing that we need to formulate a digital radio broadcast policy for the private radio broadcasters. Digital radio broadcasting would provide a number of advantages over analog radio services, right? The major advantage which the article talks about is the capability of the broadcasting 3 to 4 channels on a single frequency. We already talked about it. Whereas in the analog mode, only one channel broadcasting is possible. Digital radio broadcasting can provide new opportunities to radio broadcasters and value-added services to the listeners. So this is what you need to know with respect to this particular article. So coming to the next article, it is with respect to the flood situation in Bihar. Now, Bihar has actually requested for more NDRF teams at the situation as the flood situation remains grim. Now, this is with respect to GS Paper 3, Disaster Management. Now, what the article says is that the flood situation in 16 districts of the state remain grim. The state government has called in 6 more teams of National Disaster Response Force. 12 teams of the NDRF and 22 teams of the SDRF have already been deployed in the flood-affected districts for the relief and rehabilitation or rescue operations. The flood-affected people have been forced to take shelter either on embankments, national highways, or treetops. Now, this gives us the opportunity to talk about 2 very important bodies, NDRF and the SDRF. So, the NDRF, National Disaster Response Force, and the State Disaster Response Force are specialized forces in India, created to respond to the natural or man-made disasters, right? So do remember, they are with respect to the disasters, natural or man-made. Their primary function is to assist the disaster management, relief, rehabilitation efforts across the country, including the rescue operations. Now, if we talk about the National Disaster Response Force, it was established under the provisions of the Disaster Management Act of 2005 as a dedicated disaster response force. It's a specialized force under the Ministry of Home Affairs, do remember, responsible for responding to large-scale disasters like floods, earthquake, cyclones, industrial accidents, and other emergency situations. Now, it basically comprises of 15 battalions, which are drawn from the paramilitary forces such as the Border Security Force, Central Reserve Police Force, Indo-Tibetan Border Police Force, Central Industrial Security Force, and Shasastra Seema Bal, right? So these battalions are strategically positioned across the country to ensure a prompt response to these disasters. Now, NDRF personnel, they are given specialized training. They're highly trained in search and rescue operations, disaster preparedness, medical assistance, handling hazardous materials. They regularly conduct the mock drills and community awareness programs to educate the public on the disaster management. NDRF, they are actually deployed during major disaster. For example, the Uttarakhand, they were deployed in the major disasters, in the Uttarakhand floods, Nepal earthquake of 2015, Cyclone Fani of 2019, and more recently, the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, before we go to the next topic, I mean to say the State Disaster Response Force, can you tell me that who heads the National Disaster Management Authority, right? Do tell me who heads the National Disaster Management Authority and also the State Disaster Management Authority. Do write in the comment section. Now, the State Disaster Response Force, SDRF units are established by the state governments, right? Following a similar structure to that of the NDRF, but focus on state level disaster. So it's split smaller in nature in whole the operations if we compare with that of the NDRF, right? So the SDRF operates under the State Disaster Management Authority and responds to disasters within the respective states. They coordinate closely with the NDRF when necessary, especially in the large-scale disasters. So again, what Bihar government has sought is that they already have the State Disaster Response Force, but they want additional teams, additional troops with respect to the NDRF, right? So that we can have proper and very effective, robust rescue and relief operations. The composition, strength and training of SDRF units vary from state to state. SDRF is tasked with handling localized disasters like landslides, fires, floods. And it also plays a very important role with respect to the community awareness and preparedness programs. States receive financial assistance from the central government through the State Disaster Response Fund. Now, please understand, we have got almost for general category states, 75% of this particular fund it is given by the central government. And for the special category states, we have got almost 90% of the funds of the SDRF, which are given by the central government. So do remember, which is used to meet the expenses for the disaster response, preparedness, and capacity building measures. Both the NDRF and SDRF play a crucial role in ensuring India is better prepared for the disasters through timely response, rescue operations, post-disaster relief efforts, and they are vital components of the overall India's disaster management framework. So that is what you need to know with respect to this particular article. Now coming to the next article, it is with respect to the news that Centre aims to digitize more of the municipal services. Now this is with respect to GS1 urbanization and GS2 development. Now, the article says that the centre is planning to give more funds and impetus to the National Urban Digital Mission. Now, the National Urban Digital Mission, it aims to digitize the municipal services across the country, and new modules such as that of the online booking for the community centers and registration of properties are actually being added to this particular mission. Now, the NUDM, it was launched in 2021. It aimed to institutionalize citizen-centric and ecosystem-driven approach to urban governance and service delivery across all cities and towns. The gist is that you are actually integrating technology with respect to the urban governance, right? So as to facilitate the whole process, so as to make the whole process more efficient and citizen-centric, right? So the National Urban Digital Mission, it was launched by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs and the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology in the year 2021. Its primary aim is to digitize the urban governance and improve the service delivery in the Indian cities by creating a unified digital infrastructure for the urban India. Now, what are the key objectives? The first is digital transformation of urban governance, so as to create a shared digital infrastructure that supports cities and towns across India and delivers services efficiently. Next is building interoperable platforms, so as to make sure that there is proper interoperability with respect to different platforms, right? If you're using, for example, let's say in the context of registering for the property, or let's say in terms of the electricity, so you can have different platforms and well integrated. That is what the interoperability is all about. Create platforms that ensure the interoperability of various digital services and infrastructure in cities, allowing the systems to work together, right, efficiently. Supporting the urban innovation. The mission encourages innovation in urban areas, enabling the development of new digital tools and applications and address the urban challenges. It also provides digital tools for cities to better manage the resources such as water, electricity, and waste, and to plan the infrastructure. Now, what are the components with respect to the National Urban Digital Mission? The first is the India Urban Data Exchange, right? So it's a platform to facilitate and the secure, accessible exchange of data between the cities' urban service providers. See, again, when you have got data in place in different silos, what happens is you cannot actually effectively utilize the data. So what this particular platform is trying to do is that it's offering a platform where different data can be integrated and can be used by different stakeholders, right? Next is Smart Cities Mission, very important. So a very important part of this National Urban Digital Mission can be linked to the Smart Cities Mission. So NUDM complements the Smart Cities initiative by enhancing the digital infrastructure of the urban spaces. Next is that there is the Urban Outcomes Framework with respect to this particular mission. So a system which monitors urban governance, outcomes and services, helping to assess the impacts of the digital interventions. So as to see what all effects, what all improvements has this digital intervention done so, right? So as to make sure that so as to evaluate, assess the performance of the digital integration. So this is what you need to know with respect to this particular article. Now coming to the next article, it says that the Manipur government extends the Armed Forces Special Powers Act in the Hill district for the next 6 months. Now this is with respect to GS paper 3, internal security. Now the article says that the Manipur government extended the Armed Forces Special Powers Act in the Hill districts of the state for another 6 months, and it extended to the whole of the state except the 19 police stations in the 7 valley districts, right? Now, this article itself talks about this particular Armed Forces Special Powers Act. So the article says that the 1958 law gives the power to the army and the Central Armed Police Forces deployed in the disturbed areas, right, to arrest or kill anyone acting in contravention of the law, search any premises without a warrant, grant them protection from prosecution and legal suits without the union government's sanction. Both the state and center can issue notification regarding the AFSPA. This is very important. Don't confuse that only the central government can issue notification with respect to AFSPA. It's also the state government, right? So currently, the Ministry of Home Affairs issues the disturbed area notification only for Nagaland and Arunachal Pradesh, and the notification for the Manipur and Assam are issued by the respective state governments. Now, let's first analyze this. So, as I said, the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, it's a law that grants special powers to the armed forces in areas declared disturbed, right? It was enacted to assist the armed forces in maintaining the public order in regions facing insurgency or unrest. See, the objective is, the crux is that you have got certain parts, certain regions in the country which are actually bearing the brunt of insurgency, right? And there the conditions are not good, right? And the conditions are very tough. Therefore, the military forces, the armed forces are given special powers in such areas so as to make sure that they can maintain effective law and order in such places. So this was enacted in the year 1958. And this initially applied to the northeastern states like Nagaland and Manipur to tackle the insurgency. Over time, the act has been extended to Jammu Kashmir 1990 onwards, as we saw the increase in the militancy, and parts of the other northeastern states, depending upon the intensity of the conflict and law and order situations. Please understand that right now we are witnessing issues in the Manipur, primarily with respect to the conflict between the Meiteis, the dominant Meiteis, and the Kukis, right? Also, we have got the Zomi community who are actually infiltrating from the Myanmar side, right? And they are associated with the Kuki communities, right? So that's the reason that we are witnessing a very tough situation in Manipur, and that's the reason that this AFSPA has been actually extended. What it does, it gives special powers to the armed forces. It allows armed forces personnel to use force, arrest without a warrant, even shoot to maintain public order in disturbed areas. Soldiers have the authority to search the premises and make arrests without requiring a warrant. The Act grants immunity from prosecution or actions taken under its provisions unless permitted by the central government. Disturbed area declaration. A region is declared as a disturbed area by the center or state government under the Disturbed Areas Act. So we have a separate act for this. And once declared, the AFSPA can be applied. The rationale for such declaration usually involves insurgency, political instability, or terrorist activity. So this is what you need to know with respect to AFSPA. So the next article is with respect to the very important Dadasaheb Phalke Award. Now, see, it has been conferred for this year to Mithun Chakrabarti. Now, this award becomes really important, can be asked in the prelims. So, this award is India's highest award in the fields of cinema, established to honor the lifetime contribution of individuals to the growth and development of Indian cinema. Now, see, this award is primarily named after Dadasaheb Phalke, the pioneer of Indian cinema, who directed the first full-length Indian film, that is Raja Harishchandra, in 1913. The award was instituted in 1969 by the Government of India to recognize the excellence in the Indian film industry. It is awarded annually by the President of India and at the National Film Award ceremony. The recipient receives a Swarn Kamal, that is Golden Lotus, trophy, a shawl, and a cash prize. So what is the eligibility? So it's not just restricted to the actors, right? We can have other producers or even directors who can get this. So the award is conferred upon individuals for their lifetime contributions to Indian cinema. It is not limited to actors, but also recognizes directors, producers, screenwriters, and other professionals in the film industry. The selection is made by a committee appointed by the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. Now, this award becomes really significant because this is considered as the highest honor in the Indian cinema, and this is similar to that of the Oscars in the United States. It recognizes not only the artistic excellence but also the impact of cinema on the society and culture in India. So we have got Mithun Chakrabarti, who has been actually given this particular award for this year. So coming to the last article of the day, it is with respect to the suicide pod, also known as the sarcopods, right? So the news says that the Switzerland police has opened a criminal case and arrested 4 people in connection with the suspected death of a 64-year-old American woman in a suicide capsule, right? So we have the sarcopod. If you just see in this image, this is a sarcopod. Now, see, what we are trying to say is the name is actually derived from sarcophagus. Now, these were the stone coffins which were used to bury ancient royalty in Egypt, Greece, and Rome. You can just see in the image, these are sarcophagus. Now, this particular sarcopod, it was engineered by Philip Nietzsche, right? Again, before we go into the further, let's first talk about euthanasia. What is the difference between euthanasia and the assisted dying, right? See, both are the ways in which a person can end their life. Euthanasia involves physician administering a lethal drug to the patient who might be suffering from a terminal or debilitating illness, right? So do remember. Assisted dying, on the other hand, it relies on self-administration. So do remember, it is on the basis of self-administration of the lethal substance with medical involvement restricted only to the drugs procurement. So the physician is not actually interfering. Physician is not helping you to die. Physician is only procuring the drugs. Whereas in euthanasia, there is an active involvement of the physician for a person who is actually suffering from a terminal illness or a debilitating illness. Now, what is a sarcopod? As I just showed you, it's an airtight 3D printed capsule which is placed on a stand with a canister of liquid nitrogen. What happens is that once you have got a person inside, he or she can press a button and then you have got the release of the nitrogen gas and then the person dies by suicide. Then the liquid nitrogen gas in the generator is released, rapidly bringing down the oxygen level in the capsule. And then the user loses the consciousness and death comes at a short time later. Now, how can you have these things in Switzerland? So what the Switzerland law says, that active euthanasia is actually banned in Switzerland, but assisted dying and assisted suicide are legal. So in this case, what is happening is that you have been provided a suicide pod. You yourself are actually clicking on that particular button and there is no interference by the physician, right? So that is what is assisted dying is. And that is for the reason that these laws have made Switzerland a destination for death tourism, right? Something which is very bizarre, right? Now, this law does not account for machines like sarcopod, and that's the reason what the officials in the Switzerland are saying is that this is basically a misuse of the law, right? And that's the reason what they have arrested many people over there. So before we end the session, I just want to ask you a question. Can you just tell me, is euthanasia legal in India, right? And what are the two kinds of euthanasia? If euthanasia is legal, what kind of euthanasia in India is legal, right? So do let me know in the comment section. So here we come to the end of the session. I hope you really enjoyed the session. As you know that we have shifted to a new pattern. Do let us know through your likes and comments, and that would serve as an appreciation for us so that we continue to provide you the quality material. That is it for today. Thank you so much. All the best.